Happy Sunday, everybody. We are still working our way through the Grimm Brothers fairy tales published in 1812 and 1815. And we've already discovered so much truth that it created the motivation and the need to begin this channel separately from my original channel, Far From Eden. We discovered that we really need to go back in time to listen to what our ancestors, the people who created Western civilization, were trying to instill in us, and what they knew was truth. So today, the fairy tale is The Six Servants. Now, if you're new here, welcome. I don't read these ahead of time because I want to experience them, for the first time with you guys. That means that my reactions are, in the moment. And so is my analysis. It's interesting because my original analysis, the more I think about the tale later, just as literature is supposed to do, the truth and everything, the bigger concepts, sinks in more. And I think that was the intention of these fairy tales. Yes, they're fantastical. Yes, they're entertaining. We often say on this channel, okay, it's time for the mushroom trip. About 3/4 of the way through, we'll see if we have that in the Six Servants. But deeper than that, there's more. And deeper than that, there's more. And the overlords of society, those who pull the strings above the politicians and the governments that we think are in charge, don't want you to know the very, very things that the Grimm brothers thought were imperative for us to know to protect their civilization. It is and I've said this time and time again, and you will hear me refer to the French Revolution, because I think that is where everything broke. This idea of liberté, like, oh, do as thou wilt. That sounds familiar. Satanic Bible. Anybody? This was written, or this was published. They felt the need to publish this shortly after the French Revolution, because I believe it was in response to the evil that was coming, like communism. So without further ado, The Six Servants. All right. An old queen who was a sorceress. Of course she was. Okay. An old queen who was a sorceress had a daughter who was the most beautiful maiden under the sun. Whenever a suitor came to court her daughter, he would be given a task to perform, and if he failed, he had to kneel down and his head would be cut off without mercy. Now, it so happened that there was a prince who wanted to court her, but his father refused to let him go and said, "No, if you go there, you won't return." Pardon if you can hear outside noise. For whatever reason, today's the day people want to do things. It's not a studio, it's my living room. Somebody referred to like the annoying washing machine. I'm like, I don't have a washing machine. It's the refrigerator, which is like 10 feet from me. So kindly disregard. Okay, so this prince is like, I want to court her. The father's like, absolutely no. Then the son withdrew to his bed and became deathly ill for 7 years. When the king saw that he might die, he said, "Go there, perhaps you'll be fortunate." As soon as he heard this, his son became well again. He got up from his bed and went on his way. As he was making his way across a forest, he saw a man lying on the ground. This man was enormously fat and actually seemed to be a small mountain. He called the prince over to him and asked him whether he wanted to have him as his servant. "What can I do with such a fat man like you? How did you become so fat?" because back then it really wasn't common to have an abundance of food like that. My, how times have changed. Oh, this is nothing. When I really want to expand, I'm 3,000 times as fat. Then, come with me, said the prince. The two of them went farther and found another man who was lying on the ground with his ear glued to the grass. What are you doing there? Asked the prince. Oh, I'm listening. I can hear the grass grow and everything that's happening in the world. That's why I'm called the listener. Tell me what's happening right now at the old queen's palace. A suitor's having his head cut off. I hear the swishing of a sword. Come with me, the prince said, and the three continued on their way. All at once, they came upon a man who was lying on the ground and was so very long that he had to go a good distance from his feet to reach his head. That they had to go a long distance from his feet to his head. How come you're so long? Asked the prince. Oh, responded the tall man, when I really stretch out my limbs, I'm 3,000 times as long, taller than the highest mountain on earth. Come with me, said the prince. So the four of them continued on their way and came across a blindfolded man sitting beside the road. Why are you wearing a blindfold? The prince asked. Oh, the man responded, I shatter whatever I gaze upon with my eyes. That's why I don't dare take off the blindfold. Come with me, the prince said. So the five of them continued on their way and came upon a man lying on the ground, basking under the hot sun, and he was freezing and shivered so much that his entire body was shaking. How can you be freezing this way in the sunshine? The prince. Ah, answered the man, the hotter it is, the more I freeze, and the colder it is, the hotter I am. In the middle of ice, I can't stand the heat, and in the middle of hot flames, I can't stand the cold. Come with me, said the prince, and the six of them continued on their way and came across a man standing there and looking around and over all the mountains. What are you looking at? Asked the prince. I have such sharp eyes, the man said, that I can see over all the forests and fields, valleys and mountains, and throughout the whole world. Come with me, said the prince. I can still use someone like you. So the way he said, I can still use someone like you, is it these men, as he went along, for whatever the reason was, they were useless to everyone else? And this man was like, hey, you've got a place with me in this group? Maybe. Let's see. Now the seven of them entered the city where the beautiful and dangerous maiden lived, and the prince appeared before the old queen and told her that he wanted to court her daughter. All right, she said, I'll give you 3 tasks. If you perform each one, then the princess is yours. For your first task, you must bring back a ring that I dropped in the Red Sea. The actual Red Sea? It's capitalized. I shall perform this task, the prince said, and he summoned his servant, Sharp Eyes, who looked into the bottom. Oh, he summoned his servant Sharp Eyes, who looked into the bottom of the sea and saw the ring lying next to a stone. Then Fat Man came and set his mouth down at sea level and let the waves roll into his mouth until he had swallowed the entire sea that became as dry as a meadow. Then Tall Man bent over a bit and fetched the ring with his hand. So the prince brought it to the old woman, who was astonished and said, "Yes, that's the right ring. You've performed the first task, but now you must perform the second." She is giving them tasks that she does not think they'll be able to perform. It's not the same to me as when the father has these tasks for the men who are courting his daughter. These are impossible tasks. Could it be that she does not want her daughter to be courted, that she does not want her daughter to be married? We see this in modern day society. We see the older women keeping the younger women single. She's an old queen. She's a sorceress with a beautiful daughter. And with her behavior, she's keeping this daughter all to herself, and she's keeping the suitors away. This is a running theme in many, many fairy tales. And if you were to read these fairy tales to, the next generation and keep them, in all of our minds, we know this is a bad thing to do. And that mothers, older women, witches, you might say, are capable of doing this. Not only is she being absolutely cruel to these men, because I didn't see her tell him that if you don't do these things, off with your head. I didn't see her tell him that. Not only is she being cruel to the men, and she's being cruel to her own daughter. Because what does she think? Like, that her daughter's just going to live for the rest of her life alone? Does she care? No. This is not providing a service to her daughter. This is not protecting her daughter. One day I'll share more about why I stayed single so long. Okay, you have performed the first task, but now you must perform the second. Do you see the 300 oxen grazing on the meadow in front of my castle? You must devour them, skin and bones, hair and horns. Then, down in my cellar, there are 300 barrels of wine that you must drink up as well, and may only invite one guest to eat and drink with you. If one trace of hair is left on the oxen, or one little drop from the wine, then your life will be forfeited to me. Okay, so she said it now. Forfeited to me. Does that mean you'll die? I just think, witchy woman. The prince replied, "I'll perform this task." And he took Fat Man as guest. Well, he ate the 300 oxen without leaving a single hair, and proceeded to drink the wine right out of the barrels without the use of a glass. When the old sorceress saw that, she was astounded and said to the prince, "No one has ever gotten this far, but there's still one task left." But she doesn't want them to get far, does she? She doesn't. She clearly doesn't. This is not, "Oh, I hope you can do these things so that you will be worthy of my daughter." It's not that. It's, "Darn it, you've gotten past my blockades." Evil. Absolutely evil. And think about it. What were we raised with? Women are sugar and spice and all things nice. Fairy tales. Yes, there are good women in fairy tales. There are a ton of bad ones. We're not taught that in this day and age. We're taught, like, really only guys can be bad. And if you're like, "No, in Disney fairy tales and other things, they show that women can be evil." Look at Maleficent. Look how they changed that character. That's the evil witch in Sleeping Beauty. It's the evil fairy in Sleeping Beauty. They made a new movie called Maleficent, starring Angelina Jolie, and kind of gave you Maleficent's backstory. And like, oh, she's kind of the good guy. She was the victim. That was her daughter, and they stole. And what about the movie Wicked? This is going to explain the Wicked Witch of the West. See what happened over the 20th century? We removed the fact that we women can be evil. Why on earth would the overlords want to do that? Why do you hide something? Because you want to use it and pretend it doesn't exist. What was the devil's greatest trick? To convince you he doesn't exist. And we are trying to convince people, among lots of things, that women are not evil, that evil in women doesn't exist. Oh my God, she even says it. I'll get you yet with my magic spell. I'll get you, my pretty. And your little dog, too. I'll get you yet with my magic spell. Then she said aloud, Tonight, I'm going to bring my daughter into your room, and you're to put your arms around her. While you sit there with her, be sure not to fall asleep. I shall come at midnight, and if she's no longer in your arms, you'll forfeit your life. I thought the challenge was going to be different. This task is easy, the prince thought. I'll certainly be able to keep my eyes open. However, it's best to be cautious. So when the beautiful maiden was brought to him in the evening, he summoned all his servants, and Tall Man had to embrace them with his arms, while Fat Man had to block the door so that no living soul could enter. So they sat there, and the beautiful maiden didn't utter a word. Funny. However, the moon shone through the window on her face so that the prince could gaze at her marvelous beauty. They all kept watch together until 11 o'clock. Then the sorceress cast a spell on their eyes, and they fell into a slumber that they were unable to ward off. So they slept soundly until 11:45. When they awoke, the maiden was gone and had been carried away by the old woman. The prince and the servants moaned and groaned, but Listener said, Be quiet. And as he listened, he said, She's being kept in a rock 300 miles from here and is lamenting her fate. Why is she kept in a rock? Then Tall Man said, I want to help. All at once, he lifted the blindfold. Then Tall Man said, I want to help. All at once, he lifted the blindfolded man, Exploder, his name's Exploder, onto his back. And in no time, they were in front of the enchanted rock. As soon as Tall Man took off the blindfold, Exploder needed only to look around, and he shattered the rock into 1,000 pieces. Tall Man lifted the maiden from the rock with his arms and carried her back in a split second, just as the clock struck 12. The old woman came, thinking that the prince would certainly be alone and deep in sleep. But there he was, in good spirits, and with her daughter wrapped in his arms. Now, to be sure, the old woman had to keep quiet, but she was suffering. And the princess was also annoyed that someone like the prince was supposed to have won her. Well, that's bratty. Once again, though, if you're raised by a sorceress witch, what's the daughter gonna be? She doesn't seem to have a father. It's the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And unfortunately, this is how each generation perpetuates evil, bad things, bad behavior, lack of character, and it's happening here. The next morning, the sorceress had 300 cords of wood gathered together and said to the prince that even though he had performed the task, he couldn't have her daughter for his wife until someone was ready to sit in the middle of the woodpile and withstand the fire. She was convinced that none of his servants would let himself be burned for the prince's sake, and that the prince would have to sacrifice himself on the woodpile out of love for her. Then the princess would be rid of him. I shouldn't have thought that this old lady is evil and this maiden is good. See that? That's my own indoctrination. How could she possibly be good? What has she been taught? Probably to hate men. But when the servants heard this, they said, "We've all done something with the exception of Frosty." Oh, yeah, Frosty. Oh, boy. So they picked Frosty up and placed him in the middle of the pile of wood and set fire to it. Once the fire got going, it burned for 3 days. And when it was extinguished, Frosty stood in the middle of the ashes, trembling like an aspen leaf, and said, "Never in my life have I endured such a frost. And if it had lasted much longer, I'd have been frozen stiff." Now the beautiful maiden had to marry the prince. Still, when they drove to the church, the old woman said, "I'll never give in." And she sent soldiers to massacre them and to bring back her daughter. Man, she's evil. However, Listener had his ears perked and had heard everything that the old woman had said. Then he told Fat Man, who spat on the ground once or twice and formed a huge lake that stopped the soldiers. Quite a team he got together, didn't he? And these were all men that seemed to have been thrown away. What's happening in this story? The men are being thrown away or killed. Yeah. It's clearly, like I said, right after the French Revolution, after so many wars have been fought, and so many wars have been fought today too. And what happens with men? They're thrown away and they're killed. God. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so he spat on the ground and formed a huge lake that stopped the soldiers. When the soldiers didn't return, the old woman sent her knights in armor. But Listener heard the rattling of the armor and undid the blindfold of Exploder, who took a piercing look at the enemy, and they shattered like glass. Thus, the prince and his bride could continue on their way undisturbed. And after the couple had been wed and blessed in church, the 6 servants took their leave and set out to seek their fortune in the world. Now they had each other. Now there's brotherhood. But I doubt the old woman's finished. What do you guys think? Do you think she's done? Do you think she's just going to say, "You're right, I lost"? Doesn't sound like a witch to me. My witchometer says no. All right. Half an hour from the prince's castle was a village. And outside the village, a swineherd was tending his pigs. When the prince and his wife arrived there, he said to her, "Do you know who I really am? I'm not the son of a king, but a swineherd." Okay, wait a second. Half an hour before the prince's castle was a village, and outside the village, a swineherd was tending his pigs. When the prince and his wife arrived there, he said to her, sorry, I had to read that again just to make sure that's what the prince was saying. Do you know who I really am? I'm not the son of a king, but a swineherd, and the man with the pigs over there is my father. You and I must now get to work and help my father look after the pigs. He's a working class man. Maybe that's why he understood the value of all the other men. The prince took lodgings at the inn and secretly told the innkeeper and his wife to take away his wife's royal clothes during the night. He told the innkeeper and his wife to take away his wife's royal clothes during the night. It's translated from German. Sometimes it's a little. When she awoke the next morning, she had nothing to put on. And the innkeeper's wife, the innkeeper's wife. I'm sorry, you guys. I'm sorry. When she awoke the next morning, she had nothing to put on, and the innkeeper's wife gave her an old dress and a pair of woolen stockings. I need to slow down. I'm too excited. This is a really good tale. Woolen stockings. Ooh, itchy. At the same time, the woman acted as if she were giving the princess a grand gift. So the princess believed that the prince really was a swineherd and tended the pigs with him. Okay? Oh my. I've deserved this because of my pride, she remarked. There's a lesson. I've deserved this because of my pride. All this lasted a week, by which time she could no longer stand it. Her feet had become all sore. Then some people came and asked her whether she knew who her husband was. Yes, she answered. He's a swineherd, and he's gone out to do a little trading with ribbons. Then they asked her to go with them, and they brought her up to the castle. When they entered the hall, the prince was standing there in his royal attire, but she didn't recognize him until he embraced and kissed her and said, I suffered a great deal for you, and it was only right that you should also suffer for me. Right on. He taught her a lesson. We're not done. Now the wedding was truly celebrated, and the person who has told this tale would have liked to have been there too. Indeed. Indeed. Wow. You guys. Yep. He had to teach her a lesson. She knew it was her pride. You might be saying, well, why did she so willingly tend the swineherd? How else is she going to have shelter and eat? Once upon a time, the world was natural. We didn't have industrialization. Women needed men for those things. Men needed women if they wanted a legacy, procreate, right? And prepare the food, etc. We needed each other. We truly needed each other. And she had to. She had no choice. She had no choice. But she appears to have done it without grumbling. She appears to, in that suffering, recognized where her character was lacking. She recognized, oh, shoot, I'm in this situation because I've been so prideful. Why on earth did I think that I'm a princess so I don't have to do this, etc.? I'm entitled to so much more. No one's suitable for me, etc. She recognized. How did she recognize that? Through suffering. I once learned, and I wish I could tell you where I learned it. And Rojas, here you go in the chat. He's our resident spiritual janitor. This is what I learned. That suffering brings us closer to Christ, which makes perfect sense because he suffered. So when we suffer, oh, you guys, So when we suffer here on this earth, and we will, because that's what life does, we're going to suffer in some way or another: sickness, sadness, tragedy, all kinds of things, right? Hunger, all sorts of things. When we suffer in this life, it presents an opportunity for our character to be revealed. And it presents an opportunity for us to grow closer to Christ. When the prince brought her in as the wife of a swineherder, she then had to suffer. She then, because he had suffered to get her, she then had to suffer to have her character revealed to herself so she could make corrections and humble herself and grow closer to him. God, man, woman, child. Could it be man suffers to grow closer to Christ? Woman suffers to grow closer to man? Is that what this fairy tale is teaching us? Or just reiterating that when we suffer, we grow closer to Christ and our character is revealed, and it's an opportunity for us to humble ourselves? What do you guys think? I think I might be onto something. Oh, but they're just fairy tales, right? It's just a fairy tale. Just a silly little tale we used to tell children. Don't take it seriously. You better take fairy tales seriously. What is that from Pirates of the Caribbean? Funny to quote a Disney movie. You best be believing in fairy tales because you're in one. Although he says ghost stories. In a way, we're all in one. It's the story of life. It's archetypes. It's character. Just brings them out in fantastical ways. They're parables, really, because we shape our world with stories. The stories we read, the stories we tell, shape our worldviews. That's why barely anybody really knows about the Grimm brothers anymore, because they don't want this shaping our worldview. They want to shape their worldview the way they want to, and it is contradictory to this. Thank you guys for being here today on Sunday. Welcome to all the new people. I'm so grateful to share this with all of you. It truly brings me joy. It truly feeds my soul. And I hope that it's done the same for you. So with that, make sure you continue to feed your souls. You continue to protect your peace. I love you guys. I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye.